The story of Disney's live-action Snow White remake has become one of the most talked about controversies in recent Hollywood memory. What was supposed to be a major reimagining of a classic fairy tale turned into a cultural battlefield where fans, critics, and even casual moviegoers clashed over casting choices, public comments, and the way the film was marketed. At the center of it all are Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, and Rachel Zegler, who was cast as Snow White. Their names became lightning rods for discussion, not only about Disney's creative decisions, but also about wider debates in entertainment, representation, and respect for audiences. When Disney first announced that it would produce a live-action Snow White, expectations were sky-high. The original 1937 animated classic is not only beloved, but also historically significant as the first full-length animated feature ever made. Many assumed that the studio would treat this adaptation with extreme care, honoring tradition while carefully weaving in modern updates. However, almost immediately, skepticism began building. The casting of Rachel Zegler as Snow White raised eyebrows not only because she was relatively unknown at the time, but also because she did not physically match the traditional image of the character that generations had grown up. While many celebrated the casting as a move toward inclusivity, others argued that Disney was bending too far into politics instead of focusing on storytelling. Rachel Zegler's own public statements added fuel to the fire. Instead of reassuring audiences that the heart of Snow White would be preserved, she often dismissed the original film in interviews. She called the 1937 version outdated and suggested that her Snow White would not be waiting around for true love or a prince to rescue her.
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
While those comments might have resonated with certain modern viewers, they angered many fans of the original story. For them, it sounded as if she was disrespecting the foundation of the film that gave her this opportunity in the first place. The backlash grew stronger online, with hashtags calling for boycotts of the film before it had even wrapped production. In contrast, Gal Gadot approached her role with a different energy. As the evil queen, she was given the chance to lean into a villainous, theatrical performance. Gadot often spoke about how much fun she had embracing such an iconic role, and her interviews tended to be more measured. However, even her presence in the film was not enough to calm critics who felt that Disney had already mishandled the project. The controversy was less about Gadot herself and more about the overall messaging that surrounded the remake. Still, being tied to a divisive project meant her name was dragged into discussions about Disney's creative decline. The backlash reached a tipping point when more clips of Rachel Zegler's interviews surfaced on social media. In several instances, she expressed frustration at the constant question of her role and the legacy of the original film. She stated that Snow White would no longer be dreaming of true love and that the prince character might be removed or rewritten entirely. What might have been intended as empowerment for a new generation was instead interpreted as condescension toward the audience who had loved the story for decades. Internet culture thrives on outrage, and soon Rachel Zegler became a trending topic for all the wrong reasons. Memes, angry posts, and boycott campaigns spread quickly. At this point, the situation was not just about a film. It became symbolic of a larger cultural war. On one side were fans who felt Hollywood was erasing tradition, rewriting beloved stories, and insulting the audiences who had supported them for years. On the other side were those who argued that updating fairy tales for modern values was necessary, that representation mattered, and that audiences should welcome fresh perspectives. Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler, whether they intended to or not, were suddenly positioned as figureheads in this ongoing debate. Disney's marketing strategy also made matters worse. Instead of calming the storm, the company leaned into the idea of Snow White being a new kind of hero. Trailers and promotional material emphasized the changes rather than reassuring audiences that the heart of the story remained. In the age of social media, perception is everything, and perception here was disastrous. Boycotts were openly organized on platforms like Twitter and YouTube, with creators posting long videos criticizing Disney's approach. Some even pointed to declining box office results from other recent remakes as evidence that Snow White would be another financial misstep. Here is where the story becomes truly fascinating. Disney had once built its empire on timelessness. The company's classics were designed to be handed down from generation to generation. But now, in the pursuit of modern relevance, it seemed to be alienating both older fans and younger audiences who sensed the tension. Gal Gadot, who had previously been celebrated worldwide for her role as Wonder Woman, found herself caught in the middle. She was praised for her professionalism and her willingness to dive into the character, but the negative press surrounding the project meant even her performance was overshadowed. Rachel Zegler, meanwhile, faced relentless criticism online, often crossing into personal attacks that went beyond the film itself. As months went on, the Snow White controversy became less about the film and more about the state of modern Hollywood. Critics argued that studios like Disney had become disconnected from their audiences, prioritizing political messaging over authentic storytelling. Supporters of the remake countered by saying that backlash often comes from resistance to progress. Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler were both swept up in this storm. Their personal reputations, tied to a broader debate they did not fully control. Interestingly, not all of the backlash was about politics or casting. Some of it was about the simple idea of respect. Many longtime Disney fans felt disrespected disrespected by the way the original film was talked about. Instead of celebrating the 1937 classic as a foundation to build upon, some of Rachel Zegler's statements made it sound as though the original was something to be mocked or discarded. For those who had grown up with Snow White as a cherished story, this felt like an attack not only on the film but also on their childhood memories. In the world of entertainment, perception is sometimes more powerful than reality. Even if the remake turned out to be visually stunning and well acted, the damage had already been done in the minds of many potential viewers. The controversy also raises an important question. Should actors speak so freely about projects that are still in development, especially when they know that public sentiment is fragile? Rachel Zegler's honesty might have been refreshing, but it also opened the door for massive backlash. Gal Gadot, by contrast, stuck to safe talking points and avoided controversial comments. This difference in approach highlighted how much words matter in the age of instant social media reactions. By the time production updates slowed and the film neared release, the question was no longer whether it would succeed, but how badly it might fail. Box office analysts predicted that the backlash would hurt ticket sales significantly, especially in international markets where traditional portrayals of characters still hold more influence. Disney was suddenly faced with the possibility that one of its most iconic titles could become a major financial disappointment. Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler were at the heart of a cultural storm that neither of them had the power to fully control. Looking back, one might wonder what could have been done differently. Perhaps Rachel Zegler could have approached interviews with more restraint, focusing on celebrating the original film while still expressing her excitement for a modern update. Perhaps Disney could have adjusted its marketing to highlight the timeless elements of Snow White rather than emphasizing how different this version would be. Perhaps Gal Gadot, with her global star power, could have been positioned more prominently to draw attention away from the controversy. Instead, a series of missteps combined to create a perfect storm of backlash. The Snow White remake has now become more than just a movie. It is a symbol of how divided audiences feel about modern Hollywood, about the balance between tradition and progress, and about the respect owed to original works of art. For Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler, this project will likely remain a defining chapter in their careers, one remembered not only for the roles they played but also for the cultural firestorm that surrounded them. In the end, this controversy is a reminder of something very simple yet very powerful. Stories belong to the people who cherish them. Audiences hold them close, sometimes for generations. When a studio touches those stories, it must do so with care, respect, and humility. Without that, even the brightest stars like Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler can find themselves at the center of boycotts, backlash, and PR disasters. And now let me ask you directly, do you think the backlash to Snow White was an overreaction, or was it a justified response to the way Disney and its stars handled the project? Your answer to that question says a lot about how you see the future of Hollywood and its relationship with audiences.